Welcome back to Good Morning Tobago viewers. Now, the conversation keeps going where Caribbean Airlines is concerned. And we heard from both MPs, and we heard from Ministers Ayanna Webster Roy and Minister Shapaka Joe, Tobago East and Tobago West MPs, yesterday evening. Now, I mean, one thing that came out of that conversation, and I mean, by the way, I should introduce my guest before I go straight into my question. We already started talking, so it feels like we've already introduced him. But good morning and welcome to Mr. Ashworth Jack. And he is, of course, a former minority leader within the space.
Yes,
How are
good
you?
morning, Kandace. Good morning, all the viewers on Tobago Update. I'm fine and I'm happy to be here this morning.
Great. So, first of all, I mean, actually, before we get into the question, what is your initial reactions to all that has happened since Sunday, Monday?
What it does is that it highlights the fact that all over the world, pilots take industrial action. I mean, you've seen it all over the world, but the problem with the Tobago scenario is that Caribbean Airlines is the only carrier that goes between the islands. So when there's a industrial action, whether it be ground staff, whether it be pilots, it shuts the communication between the islands down. Also, the majority of, even if the flights coming from international, there are very few flights that come straight to Tobago. So there's a connector out of Trinidad. So again, here we have a situation where even if you get into Trinidad to transit to Tobago, that becomes another problem altogether. So I think that is what the major issue that faces us in Tobago, the monopoly of Caribbean Airlines. And so any problems with Caribbean Airlines or its ground staff, Tobago is going to be suffering.
And Tobago continues to suffer after several decades.
Yeah.
But
For as long as we have had airlines between the islands, you know, from Titas, I mean, you're right, I don't know about Titas, all right, all the way to Biwi,
I know it from Air Caribbean.
Right, no, there was Caribbean Airways.
Yes.
But there was Titas first. And so this is a situation that is not new. It reminds me of trying to travel to Tobago for Easter. For as long as I have known myself, people have been having trouble to come to Tobago for Easter. And it seems to be a problem that we cannot solve, or we don't have the desire to solve. And so I think that what Sunday showed all of us is just another situation where having one of anything that is essential could create a problem for you.
Certainly. Now, we had the ministers yesterday come out and say, well, they very much defended Caribbean Airlines, even though they acknowledged that, you know, the air bridge, there could be some improvements on the air bridge. They defended the actions by Caribbean Airlines. They defended that the way that they've been managing the routes and saying that, you know, we shouldn't. First of all, let's go with Minister Kajo saying that opening up the air bridge to other airlines is not a good idea.
I try to rationalize why it's not a good idea. Because nobody have come up with a good rationale as to why it's not a good idea. Tobago is not the only small island in the Caribbean. It is not the only small island that have a twinning situation in this sovereign democratic state consisting of two islands. This is our uniqueness. But the definition of insanity is doing the same thing the same way and expecting a different result.
But are we doing the same thing the same way? Because
no, I think we're regressing.
But yeah, because the reason why I brought this up, because before COVID-19, we had about 24 flights. Now we only have 12. What? So we're not even doing the same thing.
No, we're regressing, right? And I'm glad you raised that. Because before 2012, we were told that it was impossible to run more than 12 to 14 flights. In fact, you only had additional flights when this was a big weekend, when there were a number of persons from this sister isle who was in Tobago that needed to go back. And so they put on additional sections to take them back. And that still happens. Island Crushers Weekend. if you could call it that, there was a situation where additional flights were put on because there were important people children coming to Tobago, ministers children, senior police officers,
All the business.
all the business people children was coming, and they added additional flights to accommodate them. So it is not that it can be done. Secondly, I heard, I think it's Senator Senator Hizop saying at the question of the tourism on the Joint Select Committee that he came up on a flight and there was nobody to go back down, so he didn't think it wasn't profitable. The question that he did not answer is, was that flight announced? That flight was not announced. That was a flight put on to accommodate the children of those people. So nobody knew there was a flight, so you couldn't book it. So you hear some of these things and you wonder. But let's get back to the genesis of this thing. We were told for 50 odd years that no, you couldn't get additional flights late into the night in Tobago. In 2012, I approached the government a Tuesday morning at about 7 o'clock. I came from Trinidad Monday. And there were a number of things happening in this space. And it was coming to a Carnival time, so it was close to February. And I was coming to Tobago. And in coming to Tobago, there were a number of young people that were on the airport. They were very, very loud. I mean, young people. They were in a very festive mood. And I asked them, I said, you know, one of them recognized me. And he came and said, Mr. Jack. And I said, hey, where are you going? Where are you going? He said, we're going to Tobago. And he said there was a Marshall Montano concert in the, what is now called the Parade Square.
Mm-hmm.
And he was going to this, they were coming to Tobago to go to a Marshall Montano concert and to go back the next morning. And I said, but that is strange, you know, Marshall have a concert or performs in Trinidad almost every night for Carnival. And they said for security reasons, their parents would not allow them to party in Trinidad. Of course, it says something. It was people who were at a certain economic status. While we were there were two persons, or two people, I should say, that went to do dialysis. And they were on the airport, and they couldn't get a seat to come to Tobago because of all that was happening. And then there were a number of young people who came in who were going to school in the afternoon in Trinidad, and then had to travel back. And they're all complaining about the same thing, that once they met that 8-something flight, that was it. They had to sleep on the airport. I mean, you could imagine somebody coming from doing dialysis, uncomfortable as ever, because, you know, when you're dialyzed, people react differently to it. And because they're not patients in the hospital in Trinidad, so they have to come back to Tobago. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't understand it. And I said, you know, this is a strange one, that we continue to suffer the same thing. I took up my phone and I called the then Prime Minister. I said, Prime Minister, are you aware that Trinidad secedes from Tobago 9 o'clock every night? And she said, Ashworth, why you have to use such colorful language all the time? I said, because it's true. And I explained to her what it was. She said, why don't you talk to the Minister of Transportation? At the time it was Devant Maraj. I didn't get Devant until the next morning, the Tuesday morning. I called Devant and I told him the exact thing I told the Prime Minister. Mm-hmm. He said, oh God, Ashworth, all the Tobago and colorful. But I explained to him, and he said, you know, let me talk to my boss and try to get it solved. While we were talking, he said, you set me up. I said, why? He said, your boss called him. I'll call him back. Prime Minister called him and said to him, call Ashworth. He need to talk to you about something. He came back on the phone. He said, you talk to the boss before you talk to me? I said, yeah, I go to the head of the fountain. Mm-hmm. I said, I was trying to get your last. And if you notice, you have some missed calls. He said, yeah. Immediately on that Tuesday morning, we agreed to meet the Thursday morning. He said, I was minority leader. He said, let me contact the Tobago House Assembly Executive Council, and I will get back to you on the time and place of the meeting. He did contact them. The time and place was the Ministry of Works building. It was 10 o'clock on the Thursday morning of the same week. Right? Of course, the then Chief Secretary, Mr. London, asked him who will be at the meeting. When he told him Air Transport, Caribbean Airlines, Airport Authority, the ministry and stuff. And of course, Ashworth Jack. And he said, what is Ashworth Jack doing at the meeting? And he said, well, no. Ashworth is the person who brought it to attention. I am not anchorer with the problem. And so, because Mr. Jack brought it to my attention, he is going to be invited. He's invited to sit in at the meeting. And he was told that the THA executive would not be represented because I had no right to be at the meeting. I was not the executive. Anyway, the meeting took place without the executive, no representative of the executive council. It took us less than 2 hours to do what could not have been done in 50-something years. And let me tell you why. There was the will to get it done. I am hearing people talking about not being able and blaming and say Caribbean Airlines this and Caribbean Airlines. Caribbean Airlines is a wholly owned company of the government, which means they have two things, a minister and they have a corporation soul. I have seen, if Prime Minister could have made a call and said, fix this, and we got it fixed in 2 hours, that could not have been done in 50 plus years. Why can't the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago today make a similar call and say, fix this? And we went in, and just before you, we went in, my proposal was not to run until 2 o'clock in the morning. I went into a proposal that says, let us do a 24-hour. Of course, we debate, we discussed, and we came down to running 2 o'clock, which was not the ideal position for me.
But it worked.
But it was much better than we were.
Many of us, I mean, I included, used that flight quite a lot when you had to go and do something in Trinidad, it finished later in the evening, or you're coming from an international flight, and by the time you clear customs, it's quite 10 o'clock in the night or something like that. So it worked.
So all those arguments is what we use because a Miami flight comes in at 10 o'clock.
Yes.
And so we use those arguments to say, listen, you don't know, sometimes when, especially young people go and shop, when they come home, they do have a set.
Yeah.
And so they want to come home. Sometimes people just excited to meet home. There were too many things that we were saying, hey, this is how we need to deal with it. People meet me up to today and tell me, we can't understand why we're going back to the 8, 9 o'clock. I can't understand. No, I was
And it doesn't work for business.
It doesn't work for anybody. It doesn't work for students. There are people who leave Tobago at 4 o'clock in the afternoon after work and go to classes in Trinidad and have to cut their classes to get back to the airport in order to get to Tobago to go to work the next day.
Because oftentimes classes would finish at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock.
And you have to travel to the airport. So I'm saying, anybody who tells me that it's just the pilots, no. This is more than that. This is a whole lot more than that. This is a lack of will and sometimes almost punishment. Because how can you tell me? I remember when this thing came out, and we need to be honest with ourselves. When the issue was first negotiated, the then leader of the PNM in Tobago, the chairman, Mr. Wilson, if you go back to the Guardian, I was trying to put it up this morning, but I didn't have enough because only last night I was asking this. Wrote articles on 2 or 3 Sundays saying that it did not make any sense. Why were we doing? We were wasting money. So when the government pulled these flights, it didn't surprise me because they did not want it in the first place.
So in other words, are you trying to say that they used COVID-19 experience as an excuse to pull it?
As an excuse. Because we knew all over the world it wasn't flying. But what is curious about this is that after COVID-19, Tobago became the go-to place. If you look at all the social media, and I know you young people are better at social media than I am, Tobago is now the go-to place for a whole lot of young persons in Trinidad. When you have more people interested in coming to Tobago, you have less access to Tobago. And you make the excuse that, I think I heard the minister say yesterday, and the reason she was given is that um, the, the COVID, and they look at the numbers in the night, and I mean, BS. It just doesn't make any sense. If I was not a minister, and it took me 2 hours to get the government to change a 50-year-old policy.
And you were minority
And I
leader
was
at that
minority
point.
leader, right? Yet you're telling me that this to put on even some additional sections for Carnival. The minister tell you, give me a month.
I was just about to ask you that. What's your reaction to
Give me a
that?
month.
That you need a month? I mean, and Carnival, I
Yes.
want to juxtapose it as we knew that these were the dates for Carnival since last October, since the
The day
conclusion.
of the conclusion of Carnival, there were T-shirts and announcement made called Save the Date. So everybody who was interested in this place knew the last weekend in October was going to be Carnival. Okay, today, what, the 25th or 24th?
24th, yes.
The 24th. If you take a month from, let's say Monday, that was the 20th, it means that the time that you might get an answer is September 20th, 1 month before Carnival. What about how many people could properly book, make arrangement, even buy costumes? Because people buy costumes and things in advance.
Yes.
And so when somebody tells me that, somebody said, give me a month to look at something that could take place in Adelaide, let me tell you this. And let me tell you why. I know this seems to be more than curious. This is political punishment for Tobago. And let me tell you why. I used to travel to Tobago at least 4 or 5 days a week because I worked in Trinidad. And every night, when I come to the airport, it was easy to come, everybody knew me. But sometimes there were so many people on the airport that sometimes we had 120 people on standby.
Yes.
I was then the leader of the TUP, a member of the People's Partnership. So I took up my phone on a number of occasions and called the line minister, said, Minister, I am on the airport. There's 120, 130 people to be going and trying to go home. And you said, Jack, give me a couple minutes. Because it became such a staple that when I come to the airport on those bad days, Caribbean Airlines staff will come to me and say, boss, you see what's going on? Make a call now. And 15 to 20 minutes after that call is made, I will get a thumbs up from Caribbean Airlines staff. They got the go-ahead. They will be putting on a jet. And whichever minister will come back and say, you're home here, we just fix it. No, that is minutes. And somebody come to tell me and to tell Tobagonians with a smile that it's going to take us a month to discuss what we could do. I mean, this place is amazing. It is amazing. I for the life of me, I cannot come to terms with why people cannot divorce their politics from their responsibility for Tobagonians who elected them. People have to understand, it is not every issue you will see eye to eye with your organization on. Your first responsibility is to the people who elected you. But I guess a lot of people's first responsibility is to their position.
And I want to talk a little bit too about, let's discuss the financial side of things, right? Because the excuse that we hear from Caribbean Airlines, the excuse we hear from Minister Imbert, because he was the one that said also that, Caribbean Airlines is losing money with the air bridge, and that's why we needed to, have the change fee, the $50 change fee that's supposed to fix so many problems, but we still haven't seen the fix for that problem in terms of the reservation system. We had to increase the flight fare, but what about the financial impact of the air bridge? And let's weigh this in the conversation.
We all agree that Caribbean Airlines is not charging the commercial rate. We agree that. No PTSD bus charges the commercial rate. You know why?
Because it's a service to the people?
It's a service to the people. And so when the excuse is that we can't put more flights because not making profit, then support run public transport. There are too many essential services for Tobago that resides in Trinidad. And let me tell you how crazy this place is. If you try to change the directors of a company, it used to take you about an hour. If you go to the office in Scarborough, it used to take you about an hour. And you walk in and you get it changed. We have been trying to change spell directors for almost 4 months. Every day is something else. And then they tell you, oh, we don't issue numbers. The numbers have to be issued in Trinidad. We can't do this. And now we have gone full digital. And I thought that you will have a better service. You have a worse service. So if you want, you have to go to Trinidad to meet with somebody to fix this essential service. According to what happened to you, from a medical point of view, you have to run to Trinidad. There are so many things that you have to go to Trinidad to fix. If you have to go internationally, according to where you're going internationally, you have to go to Trinidad to take a connector flight. As we saw evidence on Sunday, there was one lady almost in tears talking about her child having to get to Jamaica in order to do orientation the Monday. Couldn't go, and they were told, and the next flight is in September the 3rd. But let me tell you why this is such an annoying thing for us to be going on last Carnival. You know, there's what we call a direct flight from New York to Tobago. And last Carnival, there was not even additional direct flights or additional seats available. But worse than that, there's a quota for persons who can come off in Tobago. And the rest is sold to come off in Trinidad. There were Tobagonians and persons who were coming to Tobago for Tobago Carnival, that when the quota was finished, was forced to buy a seat to come off in Piaco. When they got to A&R Robinson International Airport, they had to sit on that flight. They couldn't come off. The flight had to take them to Trinidad. And then they had to take a Caribbean airline flight from Trinidad and come back to Tobago. It cost them more both ways to go to the direct flight, the one stop into Trinidad, and then you have to pay to come to Tobago. When it's time to go back, they have to do the same thing. They have to go to Trinidad and catch the flight. The flight then comes to Tobago, sits on the tarmac in Tobago. The other passengers come on the flight in Tobago and then go from A&R Robinson to JFK.
That's really
make
crazy.
That make sense?
But I mean, I don't know. This whole situation, it is quite baffling to a lot in the public.
No, it's not baffling.
I'm not baffled
by it. What I'm seeing is a deliberate attempt to keep Tobago in a certain kind of place. You know, and I hear people asking about tourism arrivals and additional. How do they come? How do they come to Tobago? If you have 12 flights for a whole day, down from 24 to 12, it's an indication that we don't want you in Tobago. Not even the domestic flights. I was speaking about the then chairman of the PNM, Mr. Wilson, Neil, that says, oh, these are a waste of time. Yet, in the budget of 2012-2013, check it out, there was a boast that there was a great increase or a marked increase in the number of persons coming to Tobago as a result of the same flight they say they didn't want. And it's written there as a result of this flight. Now, it says that a wise man seldom changes his mind. A fool never does. So I give Mr. Wilson marks for being wise. He changed his mind. But we have seen the effect of that on the Tobago tourism arrivals, local tourists. How can we use COVID as an excuse to stop those flights? And when more people want to come after, because remember, there's a shortage of foreign exchange. There are a number of things. So people will normally fly up to Grenada, fly up to Miami, have now seen Tobago as, and Tobago is as beautiful or more beautiful than almost any island in the Caribbean.
But they are being discouraged.
That's the thing. So they want to come, but they can't come. I'm trying to go to Trinidad today for a meeting. I can't get a flight.
Well, sometimes, I mean, and that's the other thing that a lot of people don't understand. I mean, even after how many years have we been talking about this whole situation, it seems as though the Trinidad doesn't even understand us in Tobago, just even just needing to be down in Trinidad just for a few hours
They
to
come to
get something
Tobago
done.
for vacation. We go to Trinidad sometimes for health, for business, for a number of things. And so the only time you hear outcry is when they can't come for vacation. And you can't blame them because they don't face it on a daily basis. But policymakers have to understand that they make policy for both islands.
Yeah.
And once it is your responsibility, then there's nothing that we can do. And this again comes all the way back as to the importance of autonomy. You know,
And
there's a
that,
reason why the airport is named Anna Robinson International, right? It is that we'll never forget. Yeah, for people who don't know, the airport got its name because of Ashworth Jack. It had nothing to do with anybody else. I looked at it and I said, how do we, airports all over the world represents their icons. They immortalize them. Reagan International in Washington, JFK in New York, the Cheney Jigan, the Grantley Adams, you name them, the Michael Manley International. And I said, but why can't we name the airport after Anna Robinson? I called the Prime Minister. And that's the thing, I could take up my phone and call the Prime Minister. I said, Prime Minister, I want to change the name of the airport in Tobago. She said, to what? I said, Anna Robinson. She said, a good idea. I said, but let me take it to the House and let the Tobago House of Assembly debate it. That is my respect for the House. When it comes, I'm just clearing the way that you all do object. Took it to the House. The House said, no, maybe something else, not the airport. Eventually, they set up a committee. The committee came back. Less than a week after the Assembly sent that to the Cabinet approved the name of the airport to Anna Robinson. And Anna can get a flight by. This is crazy.
now, where does this leave us in Tobago? Now, you brought up the issue. I mean, it boils down to autonomy and that sort of thing. But what can us in Tobago do now about if we can do anything about this whole situation?
And that's the problem. There's strength in numbers. When you have Tobagonians defending why flights shouldn't come to Tobago, that is where the division starts. Regardless of your political affiliation, you're affected by this. Whether it be you, your brother, your sister, your aunt, your cousins, you, the individual, might not be affected for long because of your clout. But every day, people are affected by this. Almost every day, somebody tells, I'm trying to make a booking, I can't get through. And of course, sometimes you make a booking, or attempt to make a booking, I have no seats.
Yes.
When you get to the airport,
there are seats available.
Endless seats available. But of course, you don't have to pay additional $50. Because if you have a ticket, you have to pay additional $50. So just...
And that's supposed to fix the situation and no fix at all.
No, it's not. Or you just give them additional revenue. But as I said, at the end of it, Caribbean Airlines is a fully owned company of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. And once you own something, you can give the direction to which it goes. And if Tobago is seen as important, there must be some special consideration for Tobago. If you look at what happened in the last couple of weeks, about 2 months or so, you notice that Caribbean Airlines is now going after St. Kitts Nevis. They're going to here, they're going. And at the same time, when you're going to all those places, you're cutting back on the number of flights that come to Tobago. So yes, you are boosting the tourism in those areas. But yes, time in the tourism.
And that also leads to the problem that the pilots are expressing, and the reason why they took some sort of action on Sunday, because they are saying you all are you're expanding, but you're not expanding us.
And, I saw somebody who wrote on Facebook this week, pilots making $20,000. What more they want? And I was like, whoa. This is what we come to? Do we quantify people by just a figure? Do we understand that every time you sit on that plane, that your life is in the hands of these people? You really want to to get them annoyed. These are the best people in the world to get annoyed. And we saw what happened. I mean, the pilots executed a clinical stuff. Hardly anybody knew. Only their family members and stuff knew that, hey, we're not going to work today. And so everything shut down. And of course, the government knew go to is to file an injunction. They did it to the teachers, and only did it to the pilots. And I guess anybody else who says, we want to stand for our rights, you want to file an injunction and say, no, go back to work. Can you really force people to give their best? You could force them to show up. But can you force them to give up their best when they do show up? And that is a question we need to ask.
And we'll find out more when we come back after this break. So viewers, don't go anywhere. All right, welcome back to Good Morning Tobago. Viewers, we are continuing our conversations this morning with former Minority Leader, Mr. Ashworth Jack, as we discuss the things coming out of the situation with Caribbean Airlines. Now, I want to just spend some time really talking about the reasons why Tobagonians need to travel at the drop of a hat, the reasons why Tobagonians find themselves sleeping at the airport, the reasons why we are unfairly blamed for showing up without a ticket and then expecting to get on a flight, because that's a narrative that's coming from government ministers. Even our Tobago MPs are saying it to us that, we shouldn't just go and show up without a ticket.
And my question, and I think it's Senator Hizop here.
Well, yes, Senator Hizop as well.
One of those comments was what I'm saying. I wonder how often he went to Trinidad for what? Because according to what you do, there are times that you have last minute calls and you just have to run to Trinidad for our meeting, a 2-hour meeting, and somebody looking out there will ask, but there's Zoom and there's this. According to the nature of the meeting, your physical presence is required.
Yes.
And I am supposed to be at a meeting today. I do have a flight, right? And this is not something that I could have anticipated a week, 2 weeks ago. This is a last meeting. You need to do this, you need to do that. But there are a number of other things. Health. Until we have all the facilities in Tobago.
And we probably never will.
And we never will, because almost anywhere in the world, even people in Trinidad, that is why they buy special health packages to allow them to fly out of Trinidad and Tobago to go to Miami on Airbus, a medical Airbus, stuff like that. So we'll never have it. Our population size would not make some of those things profitable. And so the easy access becomes important. So we travel for that. Very rare each Trinidad will fly to Tobago for something like that, except there are some massively long lines. And they say, if you register something like this in Tobago, because I've seen it with licensing,
yes,
and stuff. People come to Tobago and renew their license because they say it takes too long to get it done in Trinidad.
And they too just need to come up for a few hours and go back down.
Right. So there are a number of those kind of things that happen. Right? Sports people. I used to be a national track athlete. You have to run on a Sunday. But you have to go down this Saturday, spend the Saturday night, it costs you money and all that, in order to run for 48 seconds. And so and then you have the same thing with national footballers. You have a number of people, you have schools going to visit industry that goes down in the morning, comes back in the afternoon. You have so many of these things happening. We spoke about classes, people going down for exam. So for Tobagonians, it is not a choice. For persons who just doing a vacation, I choose to vacation in Tobago. And of course, we want them to come to Tobago to vacation. So we want them to have access. But when you don't have access, as we're seeing now, it affects the hotels, the guest houses, the restaurants, everybody's affected by it.
And there's also this notion that, people who vacation need to plan. And while that is true, We see all the time. I mean, when you just look at the way how the world operates and even the way how people move around the world, sometimes it's literally they see something happening in another country. If they have
Just
the means
they just
and
jump.
they just jump on a
Yeah,
flight.
they
And
just
are we
jump.
supposed to discourage that
Yeah,
just because
I
we
don't
need
so.
to plan in advance?
When I was a young man, I remember I used to get up a Friday morning and decide I'm going to Barbados. And finally at or something and get to Barbados, right? So much so that when I was living in Mason, one time I came back after a 7-day vacation, there was a club next to the house. And when I came home, I said, Jackie wasn't here? I said, no. He said, well, leave the door open. For 7 days, the doors were just open. And so they thought I was somewhere around.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you tell someone, according to the pressures they're under, and as you rightly said, if they have the means, I just need to get away.
Mm-hmm.
But that is the exception rather than the rule. But to tell, I don't know if people, according to the means, could plan a vacation a year. There's so many
Sometimes
changes.
you just
The
have a
world doesn't
weekend
operate
and
like
you
that
just want to
anymore.
go.
The world doesn't operate like that
Yeah.
anymore. The world doesn't operate where you plan a vacation a year in advance, 5 months in advance. The world have come to the place where they tell themselves things are available. Let me move. For example, if you're moving around the states in the United States, you use Southwest, a number of them. You just turn up.
Mm-hmm. And you know,
You
people
travel.
often knock the expenses of flying, like maybe across America and Canada. But when you look at Europe, those flights are very
Very
cheap.
cheap. Very,
All over
very
Europe,
cheap.
it's so easily to
Very cheap.
get from one country to the
Mhm.
next in Europe.
But you see, to all that is fine, right? But my thing comes down to how do we solve this problem in Tobago? And the way to solve the Tobago's problem is allow Tobagonians to solve the problem. Listen, there are so many little things that you have to wait on the government in Trinidad to do. And it's not that you want to, and it comes back to even the company that I've been asked to chair the board.
Mm-hmm.
Everything, something that could be done in one sitting, taking you 6 months. And it's like a license takes 6 months. Approval for this takes 6 months. And you just don't have a choice. It has to be done in Trinidad. But when all that happens, what it does, it also stymies Tobago ability to create more employment on the island, to create better facility, better attractions, even for tourists.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I went for the first time a couple of months ago, to the bioilluminance.
Yeah.
I had the experience. And when I saw that, I said, this is interesting. The number of persons will travel just to see this, because I think we have in Peru. It's not
It's
it's
just a
not a
few countries
popular
around the
thing.
world that
It's
has
not
it. Yes.
popular.
Or at
You
least in
know,
the numbers that we have it here
right.
in Tobago.
So we have so much things that we are now trying to bring on stream to make us an attraction. But the biggest problem is to get to Gilligan's Island. One flight coming, that's it.
Yeah.
And of course, I was saddened to hear about the accident aboard
The Cabo
the
Star.
Cabo Star, because that has consequences again.
Man, that's how we get our food.
And that is why, I heard one person's in a meeting one day saying that we should just import this thing, import food. And I said, if you want to become a slave, the people have to feed you.
Hmm.
And so not only food, our industry comes from that. Almost everything that comes from there. And so it's like, whoa. When you think one thing is another. And so I really don't know how anybody could agree that the airline is good and that we can't do any better. It's crazy that I know so much things that's happening in Trinidad and Tobago that not making money, that they're doing in Trinidad every day. but they do it because they say, okay, this is the best thing for the people of Trinidad. And I'm saying, in terms of the inter-island situation, it has to be fixed because we're stopping people from traveling, we're stopping Tobago from doing business. And if you're doing that, then give us the autonomy, give us the power to make laws, formulate and implement policy to raise our own capital. Because, of course, the THA can't borrow more than 300 million.
Yeah.
And of course, I had to get the minister's permission.
That's definitely another discussion.
So you can't even go in that direction
Yes.
to say, look, let's get some money and partner with somebody to. No, because the minister will say, hey, you only 300 million. Oh, this is not important for us right now. I don't think we should do this. It's crazy.
All right. Well, Mr. Jack, we will unfortunately have to leave it there, but I just want to thank you so much for being on with us and having the discussion with us this morning. But viewers, don't go anywhere because we have a bit more coming up for you after the break. I say, thanks for favor to wake up and hear me neighbor. 60,000